3rd.
Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment.
Secondary guidance systems engaged.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark.
All systems are a go. All systems are a go.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at will.
Hey everybody, thanks for stopping by Minnesota Black Robe Regiment. It's a uncommon Sunday show. I don't know what I'm normally doing on Sundays, but not doing a show. I know I'm not watching football. Haven't done that. Nobody bash me. I watched a football game for the XFL last night, and wow, that was something. But anyway, you guys check out the merchandise if you haven't done it so far. I'd love to have your support there. You could head over to my Subscribe Star, and you will be able to find that on the stream or the streamer down below there. I do have a couple of new things I want to show you guys. These are handcrafted acrylic. They're hand-lathed acrylic bolt. I'm not kidding you. Bolt action ink pens. They're amazing. So my friend Kim and his wife Nancy down there in northern Iowa, they make these, and they are heavy, so they are a $50 pen. But if you're interested, he wanted me to show these to people, and he can do several different options, I think, as far as patterns go. But and if you're a northern state person like me, it's beanie season still till like June. I'm a shilling for myself here. Guy's got to do what he's got to do. So I'm going to be bringing in Steve here in just a couple of seconds. But it's ironic that I scheduled this. For those of you that don't know, I scheduled this show completely forgetting that today is February 19th, and it was 2 years ago today that Chief Deputy Brian Howard of the Olmsted County Sheriff's Office summoned me out to the conference room to announce that they had started formal disciplinary process on me with a disciplinary step notice to hold me accountable for my insurrectionist views, if you will. Because I had been speaking out very heavily against the COVID TOOF mandates and the actions that were being taken against people like Lisa Hansen here in the state of Minnesota, where they, ultimately ended up prosecuting her and throwing her in jail over there in Freeborn County for 90 days for the horrible treasonous crime of keeping her coffee and wine bistro open during the COVID lockdowns. And so the city attorney over there and the chief of police there filed formal complaints with me, and ironically called the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension and the FBI to report me as a dangerous dissonant voice. And my understanding is that both the BCA and the FBI called up the sheriff and said, "We don't want anything to do with this. This sounds like an internal issue for you." But that ties into my guest today, Steve, who is now a former FBI agent who became, shall we say, disenfranchised with what he was seeing. So, folks, if you're a supporter of the show, if you like the show, today would be a great day for super chats or super thank yous, and definitely a great day for you guys to be sharing this onto all your social media platforms. Steve has made several appearances on different shows, and most recently that I've heard him, he was on with Clint Russell on Liberty Lockdown. And if you guys haven't had a chance to listen to that, don't go listen right now. Listen to that later. Listen to this now. Go listen to his appearance on Liberty Lockdown with Clint later on. And for those of you, my friends, who are out in Washington, D.C. today or in different state capitals across the United States taking part in Rage Against the War Machine, thank you very much. It is time for us to and American interventionism across the world, and for us to bring our troops home from being killed and killing others for no, no, no good reason. So without any further ado, Steve, thank you very much for doing this. And from the top, right off the top at the beginning of the show, thank you so much for doing what a person who takes the oath to the Constitution does, and you took that seriously, and it's cost you dearly. And on today of all days, before I get too emotional, thank you for doing that. Oh, I had you muted, Derek.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be amongst a like-minded individual. It certainly was very telling with in the immediate aftermath, and even in the few months that followed my suspension, that it's just it's not that common within the FBI, and I'm kind of disheartened about it. But having resigned last week, I guess I don't have to apologize for them anymore.
Yeah. So your resignation did go through. It's all final, and
yes, it was one of the most efficient things the federal government has ever done.
with the exception of your resignation.
I notified them and got an acknowledgement within the hour. And I did that on the way into my transcribed interview with the select committee on the weaponization of the federal government. So
Wow.
they were made aware of my situation, and I kind of gave them the details surrounding my exit and the circumstances that I was facing after it was 150 days of unpaid suspension. So I wanted to make sure that they knew about the trials and tribulations that the FBI is putting not just me, but other whistleblowers through, and sort of skirting the disciplinary procedures that you would ordinarily pursue. And it's really sad. It just at the end of the day, it comes down to I brought a concern forward, whether I'm right or wrong or crazy. It's incumbent on the agency to look into that. And instead of doing that, they devoted all their time, energy, and resources into just investigating me.
Yeah, isn't it funny? I can't even imagine how much money they spent on investigating you. Well, that's probably why they couldn't afford to pay you. So, but when I look at the situation that I went through, it was 2 years ago today we chatted about this briefly yesterday, that they put me under discipline, and then 5 days later they announced that I was formally under internal investigation, but they kept me on duty for 60 days under internal investigation. I have been through some really stressful crap in my life. I don't think I've ever been through anything quite as compounding when it comes to stress as being on duty, for at least half of that time while they were investigating me for non-criminal activity. And I can relate now. When they did finally put me out on administrative leave, they had no choice but to pay me somehow contractually. And yeah, it's strange what they'll spend, the amount of money and time they will invest to go after people who are, really ultimately kind of doing their job, whether they agree with it or not.
Yes, and I mean, I brought forward my complaint and my concerns in the hope that they would be taken seriously, and investigated appropriately, and ultimately have a conclusion to that. Now, if they could have provided a sufficient explanation for what they were doing, which I felt was inappropriate, and said, "No, look, Steve, you weren't privy to X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Here's this information," and I could have said, "Roger that. I'm back on it." And I certainly didn't have a troubled or checkered past within the FBI. I had
Right.
a pretty good performance record, and wanted to continue to do the job. But the immediate reaction that I got in all of my conversations with every level of management was, "Well, do you see yourself working for us in the future?" That was immediate.
It's one of those things that when you're in the midst of it, you're asking, like, I'm going to fight this. I want to, I love my job. I love what I'm doing. And I don't want to give it up. And that's kind of the place where I found myself then ultimately in September of 2021 was, I'm going to win this fight. I'm going to win this. Like my union attorney, and I'm not a huge union guy, but I was really thankful for the one I had in that situation. Was like there's no way they win this in the Supreme Court. No way they win this. He says, but you have to go back to work after you win this. And after they've drug you through the mud, you're going to have to go back to work for these people. Can you do that? And I was like, whew, man. So you didn't start, your adult life as I'm going to be an FBI agent. You ended up there. It was calculated as far as your decision goes, but give us some backstory. Like, what was life like briefly growing up, high school, college, and then in what you kind of did that between all of that and going into the FBI, so people can kind of understand where you're coming from.
Well, I come from Savannah, Georgia, born in New Jersey, but we moved when I was in grammar school. So I call Savannah, Georgia home. I family of five. I'm the oldest. I have a younger sister and a younger brother. They tease me as I'm a golden child, never in trouble. Was just straight arrow. And all through school, the end.
You learned from their mistakes, didn't you?
Well, the end of my rainbow was always I wanted to go to the University of Notre Dame. My dad went there, graduated, so he indoctrinated me in that pretty early on, and I just I'm just a goal-oriented person, and just stayed away from things that were gonna distract me from that. So everything was about get good grades, do the right thing, and always just stay out of trouble and work your way to it. And I was fortunate enough that I did that. High school for me, I also had the opportunity to do some junior ROTC and instill that sort of that paramilitary just flavor in my background. And I wasn't going to be able to do military. I'm asthmatic. I take medication for it every single day. So that was going to be off the table. But certainly law enforcement was something that was going to be a civil service that I could have that military-esque feature, at least in my youthful understanding of what it was. They wear a uniform, they got ranks. It's about the same thing, I thought. But I went and pursued an accounting degree, and not thinking I was going to go into law enforcement. I thought I was going to be an accountant. My family is a white-collar family. We have a CPA, we have architect, pharmacist, and a lawyer. So you
ended up shooting, you ended up undershooting, didn't you? You were just
yeah. Well, I tried the accounting thing for about a year and realized I'd rather get shot at than go through tax season again.
Which is probably safer than tax season. So
I mean, for me, it was really the first departure from the plan that I had always drawn up for my life. And I just the dots weren't connecting for me. I wasn't going to become a subject matter expert on it, which was something that I sort of was passionate about. I wanted whatever I chose to do in life, I wanted to be really good at it. I wanted to walk in the room and have everybody say, well, that guy's squared away. We'll ask him the question. So went into local law enforcement in Savannah, was a police officer there, and later a narcotics agent for a task force that they have there. And then also at the same time started pursuing a career with the FBI with the ultimate intention of wanting to become a special agent, because that's the NFL for law enforcement. And that process took about 4 years. The hiring process is, they tell you apply, forget about it. It just takes forever. And the average is about 2 years. Mine was 4. So, it was, and it's problematic even for qualified candidates, because if you're a good high speed, low drag cop, after 4 years, you might be on the fast track to sergeant, and you're already a quarter away into a retirement. So they
Right.
wind up losing them people. But the FBI called me, and I went to the academy in 2014 and spent 5 months there. And at that point was married, had a brand new baby, was going on this new adventure of family and professional. And the FBI looked at my background and said, you were a cop, you can handle some blood and guts. So we're going to send you to Sioux City, Iowa, and you're going to be working on Indian reservations in Northeast Nebraska.
When people who don't know, I grew up in Iowa. I grew up about 50 miles east of Omaha, Nebraska, and my grandparents did a lot of their farm business in Sioux City, the livestock yards that used to be there well before you were up there, sir. But the livestock yards up there, that was a grimy, violent, criminal town.
Yeah,
It's absolutely true.
that's the
It's
boomtown. Well, they call it Sewer City,
yes,
just because of all the smell from the cattle, or they
Mm.
call it Suck City,
Yep.
because the airport code is SUX.
Yes, it is.
But it was actually a pretty good place for us to relocate. I really liked it in Iowa. I love the work that I did, which is pretty rare in the FBI. It's only about 150 agents work on Indian reservations.
Mhm.
It's voluminous. You're considered fully assigned if you're carrying 25 cases.
Mm.
I consistently carried between 30, 40 cases, and did that for 7 years before relocating. And really the reason I was able to relocate was because I'd worked that particular violation. And they give you an exit benefit to sort of incentivize people to raise their hand and volunteer to do it. So we did our time, and I wanted to stay, but happy wife, happy life. We wanted to get closer to our family, and we relocated to Daytona Beach, Florida, in the summer of 2021. I took that transfer, having talked to the boss, and he said, hey, we got a really active office. We do a lot of good work. I have an open spot. It's child pornography. But if you come on down, we'll get you into other stuff as well. And our office is 2 blocks from the ocean. So he buried the lead, and
He did not tell you the whole story, did he?
no. But we relocated down, and actually it's sort of a weird relationship in the FBI between Indian reservations crimes and child pornography. They're actually kind of these odd step cousins. And it's really because of they're the only 2 violations you can almost beg out of and say, yeah, you don't want to work them, and the FBI will make every effort to accommodate you. And then also the cases are voluminous. They're not overly complicated. You just got to do them and turn a wrench, and they're not, it's more quantity than quality of cases, if for lack of a better term. And
it's not pleasant work by any stretch.
No. Nobody is like looking forward to watching child pornography, but you get the reward of putting a lot of bad guys in jail, a lot of really evil people away. And I figured, hey, look, I'll be able to continue doing what I was doing. In Iowa, I arrested about 150 violent criminals in 7 years, which is astronomical compared to most FBI agents. And I just wanted to kind of keep that tempo going, because I came home at night. I have 2 sons, and there was always, hey, Dad, how many bad guys did you take to jail today? Did they cry? And I just, it was my dream job. So did that, and only was on the books doing that for a few months before word came down when my boss, who recruited me, retired. And as soon as he did that, the higher ups then kind of circumvented the grip that he had on the office and reassigned me to work domestic terrorism, focusing on January 6th.
And you had SWAT training at that point already? You had already been SWAT trained?
Yeah, I was a SWAT certified and a SWAT operator in my division when I was in Sioux City. That's the Omaha division. So the team is responsible for all the FBI's SWAT hits in Iowa and Nebraska. We train every month, and we're pretty active team. I would say we were at least doing one operation every 30 days. So I did that for about 5 years. It was almost exactly 5 years, and had that experience, and it was fun. I had, in my cop days, the guys that were on SWAT, I remember asking them, why do you do it? And the best explanation I got from one guy, he said, it's the only thing in law enforcement where they give you every tool that you need to do your job. And I'm big on training. I'm big on being prepared, and that certainly bore itself out at the federal level. I mean, you have just so many tools at your disposal, and it was a fun thing to do. There's a lot of that's a cool guy thing to do. You wear the cries and the cool guy pajamas, as my counterpart Kyle Serafin says. And you get to go arrest the bad guys.
So Where, as you're going through all of this, there's I think a misconception, sometimes a well-earned misconception. A lot of people that go into law enforcement are kind of perceived as this old traditional conservative, always vote GOP types. And then there's also some, now we're starting to see that there's a lot of, people maybe more on the left that are going into that law enforcement, especially at the federal state level. Did you grow up more conservative, more Democrat, more Republican? Where were you at philosophically, socio-politically, and all of that?
My parents are Republican. Always voted Republican, but not, I would say, activist in any way. My dad's a sole practitioner of an accounting firm, so just a businessman doing his thing. My mom's a homemaker, so they definitely had traditional family values. But personally, I really didn't become knowledgeable until I started doing my own reading after college. It shows you how good a college degree is. Really kind of came out of there and had no idea about anything at all. And so I just got that Goodwill Hunting library card and started to do reading on my own and following what was going on in the news and developed my own political outlook. And it was definitely libertarian. And I subscribe to conservative family values, but at the same time, at least in the years leading up to my current predicament, was more kind of in a live and let live mentality. You can be a Bernie Sanders socialist as my next door neighbor, as long as you do you, I do me, we're fine. But I think probably more recently, where you're finding that the other side is saying if it's not banned, it's required. I'm looking for any port in a storm at this point, and probably going to align more with a larger government than I'm comfortable with. But in an ideal world, I'm a libertarian.
And when you started reading and reading about political philosophy and stuff, was there anybody in particular that really hit home with you, or is everybody's like, oh yeah, I cut my teeth on Ron Paul. That's always the first place you hear a lot of people go. They're like, oh, Ron Paul. And others, some of them like, well, I never was really a Ron Paul guy. I was more of a Rothbard, or you can name any Hans Hermann Hoppe. It's, what do they call him affectionately, Papa Hoppe? Isn't that what they? So where did you cut your teeth when you kind of realized, hey, yeah, I'm actually a libertarian?
I'm a huge history person, huge nerd. And if you have to lean on your political, Mount Rushmore, I guess, if you will, I love George Washington. I love to read about Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and just the founding fathers, their lives, and the things that went into their mentality in creating the country. To me, is just fascinating. So I've just always been a history buff, and that formulated my basis. Because I always say, I'm not right wing, I'm not left wing, I'm a centrist, because the Constitution is the center. I just I want to be on that. And so that was really the driver for me. If you're looking for more of a modern day perspective on things, I really liked John Stossel when I first became very publicly aware. And
John's entertaining.
He does a really good job of explaining things at the base level for me at that point, where I was becoming more, more aware of what the way the world works. That was sort of my introduction into this way of thinking. And I read some of his books, and I used to always watch and his show. And I remember my wife, right before we had kids, she surprised me. We went on a trip to New York City, and we got to go and sit in on one of his tapings. And it was for the evening of the DNC in 2012. And that was yes. And he came out, and he was looking for suggested guests, because he did not like the Libertarian Party nominee, who was, I think, Gary Johnson at that point too. And Virgil Goode was the Constitution Party. And and I said, hey, you should have him on the show. And the next week he did. So I felt like I impacted the public messaging for the Constitution Party, at least for one election cycle.
So you now flash back into the main line of the story here. So you find yourself down in Florida, thinking you're going to be down there going after child predators, and all of a sudden, change order comes in for new firing coordinates, and it's now the focus in 2021 for like I don't know why, but all of a sudden now we've got people focusing on domestic terrorism. Um, was that strictly related to J6, or was it coming in from all over the place? Because I have a couple of people in the chat, Sarah, who said "Nerds Unite." And by the way, we knew he was a nerd the minute he said he really liked living in Iowa. So, and I am too, because I like living in Iowa. But Sarah can attest to the reality of just how heavy-handed some of the rhetoric was against people going to school board meetings. Were you guys getting some of that as well, or was your tasking particularly or only about the J6 hunt?
Well, I got moved into the terrorism world in October. And prior to that, I had zero experience with any fallout from January 6th. There just were no subjects to investigate when I was living in Iowa. And when I relocated to Florida, it wasn't something that crossed my plate, because at that point it had been 5, 6, 7 months. And a lot of the initial subjects who were called in or reported and had already been investigated or arrested, or wherever their cases sat at that point. So it was sort of in this state of stasis. Where there were some cases that were on the books, and the guys in my office were waiting for their marching orders on how they were going to handle these cases. So when I got rolled over, right away, my work tempo was always, what are we doing? We got to do something, because I'm used to carrying all these extra cases. And I looked at these January 6th cases, and that's when I started to connect the dots. Now, and what you have to understand about me with January 6th was I was on an Indian reservation without cell phone reception on January 6th. I did not know what happened until I got home that night. Right. So I was very much, I'm going to paint the fence. That's my motto. Paint the fence in your yard. I don't worry about my next door neighbor, because if he paints his fence and I paint my fence, this whole fence or the whole street's going to get painted. I'm going to deal with the cases that are in front of me, and I'm going to do as good a job as I can. Right. So I never really dug deep into the details of these January 6 cases or how they were being approached. But when I got rolled over into the JTTF in my office, the Joint Terrorism Task Force, and had a chance to look at the cases, and I didn't even care about the details of the accusations or the alleged offenses that these individuals had committed. To me, right away, I saw that the way the FBI is handling the cases is not consistent with the rules for handling cases. And I've been to trial. I've been to trial way more than most FBI agents. Most FBI agents never go to trial. I want to win. I've lost trials that I should have won. It hurts a lot. And so not even knowing anything about a case, if you screw up something so simple from the very beginning and you lose because of it, that's unacceptable. And then I just started to ask, well, why are we doing it this way? This is the biggest case that's ever been investigated. If you pay attention to anything in the news, you hear that it's bigger than September 11th. You hear that it's bigger than the Civil War. And for them to make this colossal mistake, right? To me, I had to find out why. And when I asked why, and the response that I got led me down a line of thinking where I realized this influx of terrorism, domestic terrorism cases, is a completely contrived notion that the FBI has created whole cloth.
When you started digging in and you're seeing this kind of this fabrication of what you're looking at, where was it hitting you? Because you took that oath, to defend the Constitution, and so you're like, well, if this is legit, then yeah, we do need to investigate this. I was kind of like you. I got off of duty that morning and woke up and I roll over and my phone's just ablaze with notifications from people of, have you seen what's happening in Washington D.C.? And I was like, oh guys, this is bad. This looks so, I don't care what's going on, it looks so bad. And I was like, this is like, it was unsettling. And I was obviously not in a position to make any judgments as far as investigations or whatnot go, but I'm like, this is just unsettling, and I'm like, this is dangerous for a lot of, from a lot of perspectives. But I'm going, as on my oath, I'm going, I don't know if this is how we should be handling this, folks. We can be frustrated, but I don't know if this is the right way to be doing it. And there was clearly and certainly malfeasance that did take place that day on the part of people that were there, but you're looking at it from the perspective of a person who's now tasked with the law enforcement angle of it. And you have to take that seriously because that's your job. But when did it hit you that there was more to it? I mean, yes, you're looking at files, but when did it really hit? Like, was it all of a sudden? Was it slow? Was it just you come across one file and you're like, okay, this is bunk?
Mhm.
Or was it a whole series of things that really led to that?
There's a few tentpole moments to me.
Okay.
Before anything, my reassignment to work on terrorism was almost exactly the same time that the COVID vaccine mandate came out. And I requested an accommodation for that and was treated so poorly and suspiciously by the FBI. I think that's when the scale started to fall away from my eyes. And I was more willing to say, are we the bad guys on this? Are we the bad guys on other things? And that sort of was a prompting to me to be to not give the benefit of the doubt to my agency. So I had that experience, and then I had a lead sent to me. This is the first lead I ever had for January 6th. This is I've been asked the question, sort of, what was the final straw for you? And I don't have a story where I was like, after 5 months, my conscience got the better of me. The first time I was sent the lead, it was an anonymous tip from Rhode Island. It was sent to Washington, D.C. They said that we think that this guy he lived about an hour and a half from me, is this person at the Capitol who engaged in violence against police officers. The task force in Washington, D.C. checked this guy's cell phone, nothing. They checked his facial recognition against the surveillance footage, nothing. They checked his social media, nothing. And the anonymous tip, that's all they had from out of state. And it was sent to me, and I looked at the guys that I worked with, and I was like, we can't even prosecute this case, even if he admits to it, because it can't be proven. There's no complainant. And they said, yeah, we got those all the time, a few months back. But if you say you're not going to pursue this, then they'll just keep sending it to you. So you're just going to have to go there and talk to him. So I went and I drove and did a knocked on his door. And I was, look, I'm not going to waste his time. I'm just going to get right to it. I said, I'm Steve Friend with the FBI. We're looking into what went on at the Capitol on January 6, 2021. Were you at the Capitol that day? And he said, no, that was the day of my son's funeral.
Oh, jeez.
And I made the man relive the worst day of his life out of the blue. So I gave him my business card and I drove back to my office. That was one time. Another time
That was your very first tip.
First one. I was asked to
How
sit
old?
in.
I'm not asking for the guy's name or anything like that, but age-wise, where was he in relation to us? Me
He was
or you?
older.
I'm a lot older than you, so
No, he was older. I believe his son would have been an adult.
okay.
And he was living in a condominium complex for seniors. So
That's a hard day for any dad, but there's always that statement. When my dad was killed in a work accident, my grandfather said, I'm not supposed to outlive any of my children.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, I don't know the circumstances of it. I didn't ask him. I'm sure the Washington would have loved for me to ask him about the details of his son's death, and maybe his neighbor and if his neighbor had gone to the Capitol that day, something like that. But I cut that off pretty quickly. I felt that I got the necessary information to close it out and did that. A few
Did you
months
get any
later,
pushback? Did you get any pushback on closing it out that fast?
no, I did I wrote it up, sent it, and just never heard again. But that's not to say that they didn't send it back after my departure, because these cases are so slowly moving because they're scraping so hard into the corners to get to the 1,000 mark. And the next one will
Wait
be
a minute.
2,000.
Wait a minute. You can't just throw that out there. So there was a quota. They were looking for
No, there's not an
1,000
official.
prosecutions. No, but I mean that was a very specific number. You said the 1,000 mark. So
Yeah,
is that
well,
kind of the accepted? Like we're looking for 1,000 prosecutions on this, or
it's my contention they're trying to get to the 1,000 convictions.
not just
Because-
prosecutions, convictions.
Yes, they want to have the arrests, they want to have the convictions, and the numbers are good for the political talking point of, the FBI has come down and brought the sword of Damocles down on these insurrectionists. But the other thing you have to understand, and is what tied to when I dug into the reason for why the cases are being run this way. Now, quickly on background, January 6th should be one case in Washington, D.C. with however many subjects they're going to investigate.
Explain that, because you said the same thing to Clint when you were on with him. And I knew what you meant, but I don't know that everybody else out there who's not been in the law enforcement world, like you as a street cop and then
Sure.
FBI and whatnot. And there again, I did detention, but I, worked with, my brother's been a street cop for over 20 years and I have friends that have been there. When you're a part of a justice system machine and you're moving, you don't investigate a single incident and then treat it like 250, 300, 400, 500 different incidents. They're all handled as one giant case. That's the point you're trying to make, correct?
Yes. I mean, it could be an enormous case with a lot of witnesses and subjects and victims, but the gist of it is there's one incident that happened at the Capitol. It's not 2,000 separate incidents that happened at the Capitol. Now, the FBI rule book says you can open it that way. It's atypical, but you can open it that way. Now, they elected to pull the lever on that, and instead of opening up the January 6th case, they opened up separate cases for every single person, and those are different violations. Some people are opened up as a parading or a riot case, criminal investigation. Another person could be opened as a domestic terrorism case. And everyone is different.
Yeah, and are they using very specific qualifiers for those
yes
justifications? Or
in order to open up a terrorism case, there have to be different qualifications in order to open.
You have to meet certain landmarks.
Different elements have to be met. Now, they've interpreted those elements very broadly. And from my conversations with other whistleblowers, there were conversations had in the few days after January 6th, where one of the big things you need in order to open up a terrorism case is an ideology, a predicate to open the case. You can't just say, well, that guy's a terrorist. Well, a terrorist has an ideology. That's the whole point of being a terrorist. So they said that stop the steal is an ideology for terrorism. So we're going to open up terrorism cases. Now, again, they're going to open up all these terrorism cases. They're going to spread them around the country to be opened up wherever the subject lives, as opposed to opening it up in Washington, D.C., where the incident happened, which would be normal. They're going to open it up where the person we believe lives and let those agents work that case. But that's not what they're doing. They're opening it up on paper. If they're opening up for me, I live in Daytona. Daytona, the Jacksonville office, which was the headquarters city, is the office. The agent would be Steve. I would be investigating the case, but that's not what's happening. I'm answering to Washington, D.C. Well, why wouldn't Washington just open the case themselves then? If it's going to achieve the same end result, why are they doing this inconsistency here that we could get drilled at on trial? Because there's a situation where I'm the case agent. I go to trial and the defense attorney says, Agent Friend, did you do anything on this case? You're the case agent. And I would look at them and say, no, because I'm not going to lie under oath. So I saw that as a vulnerability for us, even if it's a
Right.
righteous investigation. And I asked and was told that this was to get buy-in. Now, buy-in could mean that Washington, D.C. Thinks that we're really unprofessional in the field and we're beneath them intellectually or as investigators. And unless our names are on the top of the paper, we're not going to work it really hard. That's not true in the FBI. It's a professional law enforcement organization. I expect if I request help from somebody in a different office for them to work that as hard as I would work for them. So that's just not realistic. So what does buy-in mean? Buy-in means that every single field office, and there's 56 field offices around the continental United States and Alaska and San Juan and Hawaii. Every one of those field offices has metrics to meet every single year. They are determined. It's a process called integrated program management that flows down from headquarters, and then it becomes threat review prioritization, and then that flows down and becomes field office strategic planning. Government mumbo jumbo. They budget the number of cases they're supposed to open, the number of arrests they're supposed to have, the number of surveillance operations, the number of search warrants, the number of subpoenas. Everything is a metric to hit. It's a quota. It's like writing tickets for a street cop. And domestic
Except
terrorism,
no one ever actually looks at a street cops and tell them you have to write 40 tickets this month.
it's illegal. So
Right.
the metrics have to be met in order for the FBI to pat itself on the back and say, look, our goal was to open up 10 cases, white collar cases this year, and we opened up 12. We did really good.
Increase our budget.
Increase our budget. Well, and on top of that, the boss.
I know where he's going with this, folks. Listen very carefully, because this is going to blow you out of your chairs. So
the bosses of every one of the field offices are SES, Senior Executive Service. They are not on the GS pay scale. They negotiate their salary with headquarters, and there is heavily incentive based. In order to meet the metrics, to incentivize them to meet metrics, they get bonuses for achieving those metrics.
say that. Yep, there you go. Say that in terms that a warehouse worker can understand.
This year we're supposed to open up 5 domestic terrorism cases. Oh, there's not a lot of terrorists around here. Oh, wait, we'll open up 12 January 6 cases and say they're domestic terrorists, so the boss can get a $30,000 bonus.
Yeah, you heard that. $30,000 bonus for meeting the metric and exceeding the metric. You get money in your pocket, in your bank account.
And those metrics, they juke the stats. It's easily done for a lot of stuff, but domestic terrorism is hard. There's not a lot of actual real live domestic terrorism out there. So that's always you're scraping around to try to open up these cases, which on its face is ridiculous. You should be worried about the case integrity and not the case quantity. And if we lived in Mayberry and crime wasn't committed, that's not your fault. That doesn't mean you're not doing a good job. But instead, the FBI then creates work for itself to do to justify its budget, to increase its budget, to make sure that the bosses get their bonuses. And they contrive ways to do that are unethical and frankly illegal. And what's moreover, it interrupts with legitimate casework because it distracts you from doing it. And it interrupts with the tempos of righteous work. So I had the experience of, I have got a big case here, and I'm going to indict this bad guy. And they look up and they say, hey, it's August. Fiscal year runs out September 30th. Could you hold off on indicting that guy until October? Because we already hit the numbers this year. And we don't want to go too high on the numbers because then we're going to have to go even higher next year. So hold off on indicting him, wait the next 6-8 weeks. And then when October rolls around, then you can indict him and those numbers will count for next fiscal year. That's an extra 6 to 8 weeks that bad guys just roaming free.
And if you say no, they'll find someone that'll say yes.
Yeah. I think they'd have a hard time getting rid of you for doing your job. But then again, I did do my job and they found a way to get rid of me in the most ridiculous way possible because the FBI has the national security label that they can throw on things in order to bypass whistleblower protection laws, which is what they've done to me or did to me and what they've done to some of my other colleagues who were suspended. They suspended our security clearances because those are a question of national security, not a question of personnel or administrative investigations, and it requires immediate urgency. So you must be walked out of the building, and then they stretch the investigation process out as long as they possibly can, years, because they know most people can't afford to sit in an unpaid status for years and years and years, and they just wind up resigning and walking away.
Yes. Angie, who is another one of those school board people, school board meeting people who, got labeled a terrorist just by going to school board meetings. Angie said, "How is this legal?" That's the point. And that kind of leads us to where Steve goes next in his story, because you did the first case and your eyes kind of, the scales fell off, to use biblical language. And it was immediately after that you had another case and it was the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was in on an interview. So if it's a formal interview, the FBI likes to have two agents there. So another agent was sort of doing the interview and I was scribing, taking notes. We did the interview in a law office because the subject in this case was a gentleman who had gone to President Trump's speech, walked to the Capitol afterwards, seen the doors were open, and then asked permission from a Capitol police officer. And the Capitol police officer said, "Yes, you can go in." And he went in. So now he was under investigation and possibly going to be charged with the 4-pack of misdemeanors. So we're sitting in this office, and he's retained an attorney. So he's out whatever, hundreds of dollars that's going to be per hour. He explained to us he lost his job. He was a physician. His license was in jeopardy. And he asked at the end, where do I stand? What's going to happen to me? And we could not tell him because it was not within our control. It was going to be determined by a task force 1,000 miles away who had never actually interfaced with this gentleman. And it was just at that point where you're like, the punishment, the process that we're using is the punishment. Even if they decide, well, it's not worth it, this guy had permission, he's been punished. His life is completely ruined for something that we're just moving on to the next thing. Well, we got to open up another domestic terrorism case.
And I want to add too, I don't know if my sources are right, and you may be able to correct me if I'm wrong or if my sources are wrong, but my understanding is that's not the only person who said, "Look, I went in because I was told I could go in," and yet they're literally persecuting, not prosecuting. They're persecuting these people. Like you said, the punishment is the investigation. The punishment is the process. And so even if they're never charged, and you said that 4-pack, and when I'm done with this, I'd like to hear what that 4-pack is so people can understand what you mean. They're looking to charge people with even just a 4-pack of misdemeanors. And the officers in a lot of these cases, and we have video footage after roll after roll after roll of video footage showing officers waving people in, ushering them in, talking to them, glad-handing with them. And not one of those officers that anybody's aware of has been held accountable for the breach of the Capitol where they opened the doors and escorted people in.
Yep. And he was not alone in that. And the guys that I worked with said that they had opportunity to interview other people who had said the same thing. And you could see it on video. I mean, they just asked permission. And what a lot of people who have never been to Washington, D.C., and I've only been there, 1 or 2 times. It's like they took skyscrapers and laid them down on their side. These buildings the size of city blocks. It's completely conceivable that you would be on the other side of the Capitol and not have seen anything, and then walked in and now been charged. And I'm not excusing people that were bludgeoning officers with flagpoles or whatever, but I'm saying is there's a fair amount of people who are on the hook, and it's going to be expanding from what I understood. And that was brought to my attention at the first time that I made my whistleblower disclosure to my supervisor, that the intention now is going to be to charge people who never actually went into the Capitol but stood on the lawn on the outside. They're going to say that that's a restricted area and it's a trespass. What's the
4-pack of misdemeanors so people can understand?
They basically just dug through the code book and found what they could. I don't know the codes, but it's interfering with of process, or it's trespassing, it's parading. They're basically just read through the United States Code Book, found what they could meet the elements of, in order to, instead of charging people with one crime, they wanted to send a message and charge them with 4 separate misdemeanors, because then, at least it's conceivable that you could do more significant jail time and encourage people then to plead guilty to whatever they got. And which is why you're seeing people get 30 days or
And that is an incredibly common law enforcement and prosecutor tactic. Law enforcement takes as many things that they can find that they can attach, via the pin. Like, you pin the tail on the donkey, it's pinned the charge on the sucker, and they take as many of those pins as they can, and they stick as many things to them, and then they hand them over to the prosecutor, and then the prosecutor gets to look and say, which one of these things can I dangle over their head as the bludgeon to get them to plead to something lesser?
Well, and with January 6th, it's actually the prosecutors are working symbiotically with the agents. They're actually in the same office together, and the prosecutors are saying, well, no, let's dig through and let's find some more. From what my conversation with individuals who have actually gone to those offices, the prosecutors are creating their own evidence packages and having agents swear them out illegally. Wow. So you have prosecutors who are activists on this and true believers in this and willing to cross lines in order to get the results that they want, because you have to. They have to staff this up. They're asking for temporary duty people, but first you want people that are willing and excited to be there. So I was asked if I wanted to go to participate in the January 6th task force, and I did not. But I just leaned on the fact that I'm unvaccinated and I was not allowed to travel by FBI policy. So they sent somebody else, and
you're very slick.
And I got a little bit of inside knowledge of what's going on there. That they basically ask, the first thing, well, did you volunteer to be here, or were you told to be here? And if you say I was told, then they know you're not an ally, and they sort of box you out.
Angie asks, misdemeanors keep people in jail for this long only because they've got such a backload of cases now, Angie, that they have to hold them because they're dangerous. They're a flight risk. I mean, they found them in the first place, but I guess they're a flight risk, so they get to hold them until they go to court.
And the fact that the FBI could possibly be arresting and charging individuals with misdemeanors, which we were taught very early on, the FBI does not do that. And not because a misdemeanor isn't a crime, it's because the FBI is supposed to be the premier law enforcement agency for the country and should be investigating things that are more complicated or complex or involved than that. The bang has to be worth the buck. The juice has to be worth the squeeze. If you go to a major city, especially if you go to a Chicago and you bring them a financial embezzlement and it's for less than $1 million, they'll decline it. It's not big enough.
Send it down to the state. Send it to the
they'll send it down to the state, that's just awash in blood, and so the charges never stick. So if you're ever in Chicago and you steal money, just make sure you keep it under $1 million. You're safe.
Not that you're advocating for that. No,
I'm not.
The IRS is the only organization allowed to steal that much money and get away with it. KD asks, do FBI agents have qualified immunity? And the answer to that question is pretty much every person who works in the public sector is granted qualified immunity until there's a compelling reason to not have qualified immunity.
The compelling reason is if you are unvaccinated and object to illegal activity, which was one of the concerns that my attorneys had. They were honestly concerned that I might be subject to a criminal prosecution from the FBI.
So the scales fall off really early on, and then something else happens for you, because you're embroiled in this domestic terrorism investigatory work, and you end up taking a trip to the frozen north, not quite the frozen north of Minnesota, but a kissing cousin to Minnesota. You find yourself in Michigan.
Yeah, well, I was.
I know there's other stuff in between there, but.
So I was actually on the Whitmer takedown, the Gretchen Whitmer takedown, before my transfer to Florida. So I'd had that. But it's also important to know because I went there, again, locked on to what my job was. I was a SWAT operator that was tasked with going to arrest a bad guy. The Detroit field office asked for us to assist because it was a major. Well, all we knew was it was a major takedown. I drove to Kalamazoo. Upon arriving, we were briefed about this organization called the Wolverine Watchmen, who were planning to kidnap and assassinate Gretchen Whitmer. They showed us a video of these guys training, and normally we have like a driver's license photo of the bad guy. This was a video. We had these guys with they
It's
had
high quality video too, if I remember correctly.
good video. They had equipment. They had training and tactics that were excellent. And it got real quiet in the room we were in because normally we get these guys out of bed in the middle, the first thing in the morning, and
it was pucker factor time.
Put up a fight, exactly. And they used the term near peer, like you got these guys are just as good as you. And they told us they had encrypted communications, and should any one of them have an interaction with law enforcement, they'd be able to send out a distress signal, and that their compatriots would respond to a certain location and engage in a gunfight with any law enforcement they encountered. So
and normally, so you're talking about an organization that's 40, 50, 60 strong, right?
Yes. And we were told, we were the way the operation was going. Normally, SWAT comes in, secures the area, and then we leave, and we're getting breakfast 10 minutes later. But this was going to be a nighttime hit, which again was very unusual because the guys are going to be awake. Why would we do it that way? And we said, we're going to take the structure. Once we have it secure, you need to post up and be prepared to have guys come and attack you. Well, like you're defending a fob in hostile territory. And we took the structure and we sat there for hours, and obviously they never came. And I left and thought, look, I don't care about the politics of it. You can't just kidnap a public official, a wife and mother, and assassinate her like that. No, that's not going to fly.
That's just bad. That's bad news. That's just,
yeah. Like, so that's my job. And
sure, she might be the world's worst. You name it. She doesn't deserve that.
No. And that's up to the voters to decide to vote her out. You don't get to then take her out. But it was a high profile case, and followed it myself in the news. I told my bosses, like, I'm a professional. I take an interest in my profession. I read about things that the FBI is involved in. And it was very clear to me because I followed that case. I followed the prosecutions, and was interested enough that when I followed what was going on in the trial, I didn't educate myself. I tried to be like a juror. I tried not to learn going in. I wanted to see what the case was presented. And I felt that like my side didn't do its job. Like they didn't meet the burden. Two of them had mistrials, and now subsequently all four of them have been convicted. But the biggest fallout was I felt that there had been a lot of entrapment, and there had been a lot of mismanagement of the cases, and it left this bad taste in my mouth. And I could see the Venn diagram of that case overlapping quite a bit with the January 6th cases, where we were going after these guys who were not predisposed to commit certain acts, and now we're doing it. It was a political witch hunt, and with the January 6th, again, we're going to be coming in and swooping in on these guys a lot of times with a SWAT team or with a large arrest operation. And they were people who had either committed a misdemeanor or had, even if they allegedly committed a misdemeanor or allegedly committed a felony, a violent felony, had communicated with the FBI and said, look, if you need anything, just let me know.
I'll turn myself in. I'll show up to an office.
Which is ideal. Ideal. I don't care if you're Jeffrey Dahmer. If you say, I'll surrender, if you just give me a call, that it's all about safety.
It's reminiscent of Roger Stone.
Yes. And that was
fully cooperative, fully cooperative. And they still showed up at his house at, what was it, like 1 o'clock or whatever? Well,
6 a.m. with CNN called ahead of time.
Yeah. That's reminiscent of the SEALs landing in Mogadishu, and CNN is on the beach waiting for them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That took place down in your neck of the woods too, didn't it?
Roger Stone?
Yeah.
I don't know where his location. I thought it was the New York home that he was in, but I'm not sure. I know Mar-a-Lago was in the Miami division, and that was interesting note. Hostage rescue team was involved in that, which is the tier 1 tactical asset for the FBI.
FBI Delta's force.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't know why you need to use HRT for a structure that's defended by Secret Service. Seems like you could just call them.
Hey guys, we're coming over.
There
Not for
would
a
be a
beer.
blue on blue problem,
Yeah.
possibly.
So you kind of have this bad taste in your mouth from Michigan, and you realized early on, and what a lot of people then subsequently came to learn was that Michigan was an entrapment for some of these guys. It was a setup, and they were outfitted by the FBI, which was why their tactics and equipment looked, near peer, because it was. And so you kind of already have this taste in your mouth. The January 6th investigation kicks off. You're looking at all of this, and you go and you make your complaint, which I don't know, where you're at as far as being able to talk about the specifics of that. But you make your complaint. About when did you make that complaint, and how much sweating did you do prior to finally making that complaint?
I was resigned to do that, to bring that concern forward to my boss. My hope was that I worked in a small office, that maybe we could, be men and have a conversation and reach some sort of accommodation for myself. I wasn't looking to, to give them the sword to chop my own head off. So the first opportunity that I had, that I told my wife ahead of time, look, I'm not arresting anybody for these. The way these cases, I can't. I'm not going to put my name on it. We're violating people's due process rights. It's arguable that we're violating their cruel and unusual punishment rights, and I'm just not comfortable doing it. So word came out that we were going to have a joint operation with another division where multiple subjects were going to be arrested. And at that point I thought, all right, well, it's too many moving parts now, because we kept having these things scrubbed, and well, we're not going to do it. Oh, we are going to do it. Oh, we're not going to do it. And again, I got brought in October of 2021. And then the first opportunity that I had to say, I don't want to do this, was August the next year, 10 months, where we were waiting for Washington, D.C. to make a decision. So not a high paced tempo going on there. And I went to my boss in my office, and I, told him my concerns about the way the cases are being run. And he actually was sympathetic on a couple accounts. He said, look, I'm reviewing these cases and my people aren't even putting anything in them. So that's a problem. And he said, look, I'm going to fight to move you back to child pornography cases, because there's just not a lot of work for you to do here. So I thought for a minute, hey, maybe he kind of gets me. But then he went into the whole, I'm going to Dale Carnegie manage you, and talked about, well, maybe you need to talk to the employee assistance program about counseling services for yourself. Sounds like you're upset. And do you, I don't want you to ruin your career over this. Is it worth it to you? And when he said that, I was like, well, it's going to be, protect the shield. They're not going to worry about my complaint. But it was a Friday. The arrests were the next Wednesday. So he said, take the weekend, think about it. I came in the following Monday. I said, look, I thought about it. I prayed about it. My position's no different. And so that was Monday. And that evening, the second level of management called me and said, I need you to come down forthwith tomorrow, Tuesday, to meet with two of the ASACs, the assistant special agents in charge. So I drove to Jacksonville the next day, met with those two guys, Sean Ryan and Colt Markovsky, and 2-hour meeting with them, explained my concerns. And it was very clear to me they were trying to divorce two things. One being, I do have a right to raise concerns, but I don't have the right to refuse to do what they tell me to do. And they kept saying, Colt kept saying, so you're refusing to do your job, right? That's what you're saying, you're not going to do your job. And I kept saying, my job is to protect the Constitution I swore an oath to protect. And we have training in the academy about if there's any sort of misdeeds or malfeasance that could be intruding on people's rights. We go to the Holocaust Memorial, we go to the MLK Memorial. And the point of that is to say, look, if there's problems, you have to raise it. One person has to. That doesn't happen if one person steps up. And I said, look, I don't want to be this guy, but I guess I got to be the guy. You know,
Yeah.
I thought there would be more people that would be here, and I talked to other people offline, and they agree with me. They're just not willing to, you know, put their career on the line the way I guess I am. But I'm Mr. Smith goes to Washington. And I said, like, look, you have to understand something about me. I'm a nerd, as Angie knows. On July 4th, I read the Declaration of Independence out loud to my children. I guess you guys found the one. And they pushed back and kept saying, no, you're just refusing to do your job. And then Colt also insisted on pointing out that it was inappropriate for me to object to arresting people who kill police officers. And I had to inform him that no police officers were killed by January 6th protesters. And his response was, I think you need to go back and review the facts. So I left that meeting after about 2 hours. At the end of it, it was cordial. You know, we shook hands, and I said, "Hey," they said, "The arrest is tomorrow. What's going to happen tomorrow?" And I said, "Look, I would never just not show up. I'm telling you, I don't want to show up. I feel like it'll be a violation of my oath." There was even a wiretap in my office we were doing on a drug case, and I had volunteered to sit on the wire because that had to be manned anyway. Let's just do it that way. And they said, well, this is a long process. You know, it's the FBI. It's like turning a battleship. Nothing's going to happen fast, because I said, like, look, am I going to get fired today? And they said, no, just, you know, let's give it some time. 3 hours later, I got an email from Colt, and it said, you were refusing to do your job. You are ordered to stay home tomorrow during the arrest operations, and you are to put yourself absent without leave on your timesheet. So I essentially followed the order. I didn't refuse to go. I was ordered to stay home during the arrest of the January 6th subjects. I stayed home and was docked a day's pay, and then came back to work. And then the following week, had a meeting with the next level up. And that was a special agent in charge of Jacksonville. That was Sherry Unks. And in the meeting with her, she told me that never in her 24 years had she seen behavior like mine, and that I represented a fringe within the FBI. I was a conspiracy theorist, and that I couldn't possibly understand the fear that she felt because she was in Washington, D.C. the day that those people tried to seize our democracy. And at the conclusion of the meeting, she said she had already, before the meeting, already referred me for investigation by the FBI's inspection division, which is like the internal affairs, and the security division, which was going to review my security clearance. And left there and thinking,
That's a sinking feeling right in the gut.
Yeah, I said, look, it's going to happen now. Called an attorney, got an attorney, and he said to me, hey, I don't know how to defend an FBI agent. So can you go and get me a copy of the handbook? Can you get me, disciplinary procedures, that sort of thing, so I can review it and know how I'm going to protect you? I said, okay. Went to the office and got that for him and sent it over. The following week, Colt, the assistant special agent in charge, called me up and said, I need you to come tomorrow to Jacksonville for a security awareness briefing where we're going to give you essentially remedial training. And I said, look, I'm going to be honest. It sounds like this is a ruse to get me to come to Jacksonville so you can fire me. If you're going to fire me, then fire me, but I'm going to have an attorney with me because I'm represented now. And he said, you're not allowed to have an attorney with you. If this is a briefing about using FBI technology. And I told him, well, I get the training. Why am I doing it again? And he said, well, you made different decisions than other people. So good, bad, or indifferent, you're going to have consequences for that. So I said, well, now I know it is disciplinary. So I want to have an attorney. And he said I couldn't. And I said, okay, I will come if you can show me where it says I can't have an attorney. And he said, okay, I'll get that to you. And I never heard from him. And then I was suspended a few days later without any further interaction with my chain of command. I walked in on a Monday morning and the office was empty. My desk was completely cleared off. And I was like, oh, here it comes. And sure enough, they came around the corner and give me called me in the conference room, said that my security clearance was suspended, which means that you can't be an FBI agent or you can't work as an FBI agent. And this is how they're going to bypass the process. They revoke your security clearance and wait you out. And they gave me the reasons for my suspension. They said I had refused to follow a lawful order, meaning the January 6th arrest warrants, which, as I explained, I technically didn't. I stayed home because they told me to. They told me that I'd refused to participate in the security awareness briefing, which I didn't. I said, can you give me the documentation and I'll come? And then they said I improperly accessed the employee handbook and other information off the computer system because it's housed on a classified system. And I went in and used a blank thumb drive that the FBI gave me for child pornography investigations, and I took it off there. And that thumb drive was not approved to be used on that system.
You know, I'm sitting here listening to you. I'm sure you probably noticed I was getting emotional because when you made the comment about my job is to defend the Constitution, and then I'm hearing these trumped up things that they're saying to you, and you're like, well, I'm bringing an attorney, and you're not allowed. So much, Steve, so much of what you're saying. I cannot get people. I need people to hear this. And if you guys are watching this and you haven't texted this out, I'm sure there are far larger platforms that Steve's been on, but you guys in my audience, not all of you listen to the same people that I listen to. There are people in your sphere who don't listen to anybody, let alone me, who need to hear this story. And so that they can hear the similarities of how administrative types treat their, if you will, and they treat us like underlings, the way the administrative types treat underlings, not people who are criminal in their actions, not people who are breaking the law and get caught doing it while they're on duty. The way they treat people who literally stand up for their oath to protect and defend the Constitution, to protect and defend the Republic, and say what we're doing is a violation of that, they immediately turn it into you're dangerous. You're dangerous. And in the part where you said he's like, no, you can't have an attorney. I asked the day they called me 2 years ago today. I asked, do I need my union rep? My rep. Just a rep, not an attorney. Do I need no, I don't think so. He knew. He knew. And as soon as I walked in, after he answered that question, and he says, well, you're going to sit down? And he says, because I have this discipline for you. The only thing that I did different than what you did, and you probably wouldn't have been able to get away with this, is you're going to have to excuse me for a minute. I'm going to need to go and get my cameras to record this. And his only response was, oh, well, I guess you got to do whatever you got to do. And so I have the video. And so if anybody's interested, I'm putting a link in the chat for you guys to watch. You just heard Steve's story of how they treated him. And then you go and listen to how I interacted with the chief deputy and how he talked to me. It's all jargon. It's calculated verbiage designed to put you into a defensive posture because you're being told you're the problem for doing nothing more than standing up for your oath. And this is across the board. It's at every podunk little town police department. It's every sheriff's office. And not every, there are some good ones out there. At every law enforcement agency in the United States, when you run afoul of the system, of the machine, they have the same process for getting rid of you. And it's not because you're a criminal. It's not because you're beating up people. It's because you're not towing the approved line. Steve wasn't a company man. And you have friends that are getting run through the ringer still to this day for the exact same stuff.
Yeah. In the intervening time since I got walked out, I've had the opportunity to develop some pretty good friendships with some other guys who were suspended under similarly dubious circumstances. And it's been a nice little cohort of us because, we're at a point now where we've all kind of embraced the fact that the FBI sees us as the problem. And
how similar are the conversations that they had to your conversation too.
Well, they brought forward concerns about other issues, but were walked out for well, Kyle was his security clearance was suspended. Now it's actually revoked. They said he had an improper conversation with the police officer. He was shooting on state land in New Mexico at a gun range, and there's video of it. There's thousands of shell casings on the ground. It's a place where people are shooting, and an officer self-dispatched out there and said, oh, you're shooting too close to the school. And he said, well, I have a rangefinder here. I'm 800 yards away, and I'm shooting in the other direction. And the law says I have to be 100 yards away. And this is actually this isn't city property, or this is appropriate that I could do that. And the officer said, okay. And then the body camera has him saying, I'm 10-8, no report. And they said that was an improper interaction that he had with law enforcement. So,
and they don't care about the truth. They don't care about the truth, because in their minds, the agenda trumps truth. Not to use the name of the person involved with the January 6th.
Well, I mean, but in my one long meeting with the two assistant special agents in charge, at one point I said, I have a duty to the Constitution, and Colt said, you have a duty to the FBI. That was his response.
Which is reflective of the statement, one of the statements made in my initial disciplinary report, which was you failed to follow a lawful order. Never named what the order was that I failed to follow. Never. It's just this vomitous is all it is. It's just vomitous that they just throw it out there because they could put it out there and it makes you look indefensible. Mm-hmm. Like, what kind of radical are you? You didn't follow a lawful order. But what was it?
Exactly. And I mean, and look, I've told, when I testified last week to the select committee, and I've said, the righteousness of any investigation of anybody on January 6th, it doesn't matter if somebody commits a murder and they hide the murder weapon under their mattress, and the police go into their house and get the murder weapon and then go to the judge and say, look, here's the murder weapon. He did it. And the judge cuts an arrest warrant. That arrest warrant is illegitimate because they didn't follow the process.
Poison tree.
And we said, we're not following the protocol that we need to follow, and it's violating people's rights. And so at one point, the Democrats tried to sort of allege that I had, ideology that was sympathetic to Proud Boys and Oath Keepers and 3%ers, and I was like, look, politics of it don't matter, guys. And then they showed a picture of a guy, and they said, these people were coming in with body armor and helmets and Nazi flags, and what do you think of that? And I couldn't help it. I just said, look, looks like he might be a bad guy. He probably did some bad things. He should probably go to jail for that. It'd be a shame if we lost because we violated his civil rights when we investigated him.
Where is there video of your testimony?
Yeah, it's behind closed doors right now.
Okay.
And
so it hasn't.
Yeah,
but it hasn't come out like some of the other really interesting grillings that we've seen from this so far.
No, but this is more of a deposition format.
Okay.
And I think that if this committee does a good job, they'll bring, not necessarily me, but they'll bring whistleblowers to the actual spotlight committee meetings that are televised and have real concrete examples that they can demonstrate for the public, because they can't just have what they had 2 weeks ago where it's people talking about, it's the good old days and things are bad now. I'm like, we need to have actual tangible evidence that's going to get people fired up, and then ultimately drive home a message that next year, or at the end of this fiscal year, when they budget for the following year, they're going to say, FBI, you're defunded of X amount, or you were appropriating money, but you can't be used for this, that, and the other, in light of these revelations that came forward in the committee.
So they perp walked you out. What was the date on that again?
September 19th.
And that was 2022.
Yes.
No pay. You weren't officially terminated. You were just perped walk out, escorted out. Your desk is emptied before you even get there. They tell you you're gone. They take your badge, your service weapon, and all of that. They get all that from you. Um, what do you know? You obviously had the conversation with the other half. Said, "Hey, happy wife, happy life," but honey, we ain't got no money. Um, what what happened? I mean, you get home, you tell her this. You had to be just absolutely stressed out. There's just like,
Yeah, I mean, you're stressed out, but I knew it was going to happen, and I think things happen to people for a certain reason, and I was uniquely prepared for this, where other people wouldn't have been. So when the vaccine mandate came down, when we had to officially tell them we were unvaccinated, I said, "Look, they're getting a registry, and they're going to start going after everybody." So we started building up a war chest, and I had quite a bit of savings, and so I knew that we were going to be okay. And and we were even able to survive when she lost her job a few weeks later under some suspicious circumstances. And at that point, then I'm home, and thought, well, what am I going to do? So I've been trying to speak out as much as I can and draw attention to things, but there's a lot of idle time in there. And
you did the one thing nobody wants an accountant to do. You started to write.
30 days, 60,000 words, and it is on pre-sale right now. So, it is one of these things that you feel like it didn't come from me, that I was just able to write that much that quickly. But then at the same time, I'm kind of like, well, I've been researching this thing for 37 years. So I think I'm probably ready to put it all down on paper. Yeah, so I was able to get a book. It's going to be published this summer. I didn't take any money up front. So again, we're just surviving off of savings. But then I also developed some relationships within media and within the political world, and had opportunity to go to work for a think tank. And one of the things they give you when they walk you out of the FBI is the paperwork to seek outside employment, because they know you're unpaid. So I'm sure that if I had asked to be a barista, they would have approved it. But I asked to go to work for this think tank that is going to be advising the select committee on government weaponization. So obviously the FBI probably wouldn't like that very much. So they rejected my ability to get that position, which was one of the main reasons that I then decided to resign last week and accept this position. So I'm starting a whole new career at the same time. And my career is going to be investigating the FBI who was investigating me.
You aren't feeling suicidal currently, are you?
No,
Okay,
I'm very healthy.
I think
I'm
that's
very
a
happy.
good question that all of us have to ask these days.
Yep.
Lady,
And you can look at my great blemish-proof picture.
yes, it's amazing. You look
They
like a kid.
airbrushed me. I said I look like a Pixar princess.
Yeah, I wouldn't go with princess, but if that's what you. Ladies and gentlemen, so as I did with my friend Christy, my Scott Horton book almost fell down. Hey, I don't know if you know this, but I have a signed Scott Horton book.
Excellent.
I had to throw that out there just because. But anyway, I fanboyed over Scott Horton, and then I had him on my shows, and I didn't fanboy on the show at all. But I did this with my friend Christy. I told everybody, if you buy a copy of Christy's book and take a picture of it in your hand and send it to me via email at mbrrpodcast@yahoo.com, or send it to me in private message on Twitter, I would give you $5 credit towards something in my store, in my merch store. I'm going to make the same offer. If you go over and you buy the hard copy version. I think you only have the hard copy, correct?
That's it right now.
okay.
Yeah.
If
I
you go
hope that
over
they
and
let
you-
me read the audiobook because I think that would be really fun. I'm an audiobook aficionado. I love them. So I'd love to read my own
I
audiobook. It would be a
do all of
bucket
my
list.
research via audiobook and listening during my workday. So, but if you go over and you buy a copy of Steve's book from Amazon, that's the only place where it is right now, correct?
Right now, yes. Yeah. If you go to like Simon and Schuster, it'll just link back to Amazon. I hopefully be able to create my own website soon.
Yeah, well, you buy a copy of his book and you get it in your grubby little paws, and you send me a picture of you holding it. I will give you a $5 credit towards anything in my merch store.
That's great, man. I appreciate
so,
that very much.
Because before I interrupted, you were telling us that you're not allowed to go work and investigate the FBI for investigating people improperly. So, yeah, you guys go over there and help this brother out. You also have you work closely with Kyle, and I know I'm gonna screw up his last name. It's Seraphin.
Correct. You
Okay,
got
I
it.
got it. So you work closely with Kyle Seraphin, who, by the way, I'm in negotiations with getting him on here as well. So, but you were the first. So,
All right.
you guys are doing a lot to raise awareness for other FBI agents who became whistleblowers and maybe haven't had something else to fall back on.
Yes.
And that is a give, send, go. And I know you can't give names, and I'm not asking you to, but how many people roughly in the FBI said enough is enough and have now lost and been hurt by doing the right thing?
I personally know of, that gives and go, which is gives and go Kyle Seraphin. It doesn't go to Kyle. It doesn't go to me. It goes to the one individual who was significantly financially harmed. I'm aware of him and an individual who is in our close circle, and then gotten to know some other folks that actually recently just resigned under a protest, essentially. So I would say within my ethos of being able to have a conversation or just pick up a phone call, probably a dozen people at this point. But that's just a small segment of the people that have actually been harmed. And I don't even know the other ones that I've heard stories about, where you have people getting walked out for no reason at all right before their retirement. And the overlap that I have with so many of these people is not just in the objections that we raised, because there's a lot of them across the board. It is predominantly individuals who are unvaccinated against coronavirus, and used a religious accommodation request in their efforts to seek a waiver, essentially, from the FBI. So there's definitely an effort afoot that I'm hoping that gets uncovered and exposed, because it's completely unacceptable. And then there's I think Congressman Jordan now has about 24 people who have brought things forward, but a lot of those people are actually still on the inside. And I have hundreds of people in a network who are still on the inside, and every different employment code that they have. It could be agents, could be analysts or support staff, anything like that. And they bring information to Kyle and to me fairly regularly, which is how we're able to push out more and more, because we're burned. So why jeopardize their situations?
Kyle's still kind of hanging out there in limbo, because the last I heard, he was still an FBI agent, but he has no FBI duties.
Correct.
And he's
Same
not
here.
getting paid.
Yeah, I mean, it was the same for me up until last
Yeah.
week, and we were both unpaid. He's been unpaid longer because he was suspended last, I think, April, so it was a few months before me.
Yeah. So, I mean, your modeling career as a Pixar princess is not going to last very long. But where do you see this going now? I mean, how are the book sales? Are people snatching it up? Are people paying attention? I mean,
so it's only been on pre-sale for a few weeks, but I had a nice appearance with Steve Bannon on War Room, and got to top 10 on a couple of Amazon sections that day. But I think that thing kind of just resets pretty regularly. But that was pretty neat. I was screenshotted that. I was excited, and I think the plan for success in the book would probably be incumbent on me being able to continue to speak, which I'm obviously going to do. Now working with the Center for Renewing America, they have media connections and outreach that vastly exceeds what I was doing from my little office in Daytona.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be, my next big one is on Tuesday night. I'm going to be appearing with Sean Hannity. So completely different audience. And like I said, look, I'm waiting on Rachel Maddow to call me. I'll be happy to appear as long as I have an audience that I can explain the situation to. I think that I can to sort of give the lay of the land of what's gone on in the FBI, because it concerns not just right America or libertarian America. It's everybody.
Yeah. Even your more kind of normal, what people refer to as liberals are impacted by this. And it's, if your law enforcement agencies, no matter what level they're at, the federal state level, the state level, the municipal state or the county state or wherever it's at, if your law enforcement agencies, peace officers, if you will, cannot be trusted to do the job that they're hired to do, and do it in a way where they're representing their oath and the integrity of the republic, like nothing's safe. That's at all. You you said, and I've said to so many people in the interim of walking out of a career that I loved, and I did. I loved it. I loved having a positive impact on the lives of people on a daily basis. If we can't trust those people to do that, we're lost. We're supposed to be the first line of defense. People in the law enforcement world are supposed to be the first line of defense between a corrupt government, if you will, and the people. And what we're running into is that's not the case that often anymore. And you ran into with your special agent in charge. It's an agenda for a lot of people. There is an absolute agenda. Are you getting much pushback from the blue crowd saying, "Oh, you sound like you're a traitor," or "You sound like," because I'm running into that because I'm talking about holding law enforcement accountable. I'm working on some forms of legislation to really push constitutional training as a mandate for law enforcement at every level on a yearly basis. This. You do continuing education, especially when you're a beat cop. You do continuing education almost every month of some form or another. All the years that you did just as a city cop, how many conversations did you have in monthly training about the Constitution, and how many constitutional experts did they bring in to talk to you during that time?
Zero. The FBI doesn't bring them in either.
And to me, if we can teach people how to shoot, which obviously we want people who can shoot well. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't want IRS agents out there doing what they do, by the way. Those are real accountants. But I don't want them out there doing what they do if they're not well trained. And so I do want people who can shoot. I do want people who know how to reasonably use force. I do want people who know how to de-escalate a situation when they're dealing with somebody who's having a mental health crisis. We do need that. But the first question should be, is what I'm being asked to do in keeping with the Constitution? And nobody in law enforcement does that anymore.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah. And we one of my attorneys was talking to me about that. He's in Washington D.C. and a little bit more connected, obviously, than me. And he said that there was a lot of this back the blue pushback and saying, like, look, this guy's just refusing refusing orders. He's a hack, it's a messaging thing at this point. I mean, look, if people don't want to listen to what I have to say, then there's not a whole lot I can do. But I'm hoping that they will realize, look, I thought that I had a conflicting order, and never really even had an opportunity to refuse the order because I was told to go home. You're AWOL, you're assigned AWOL, which is news to me. So it's just by actual letter of the law, I didn't refuse an order. And then in the spirit of it, look, if you have, if I was receiving, in my opinion, an illegal order, or something that I felt, put people at unnecessary risk, public safety, then it was incumbent on me. And I was following training and following, the protocols that have been laid out for me.
Right.
It doesn't constitute any sort of objection to doing my job. I told them, like, this is my job. I'm not being insubordinate.
And that's what is so fundamentally and foundationally important for people to understand, that like it's a form of deterioration and degradation and collapse within the moral integrity of the structures, not necessarily on every individual officer or agent, but the structure in and of itself is crumbling because of the lack of the grasp of the Constitution and lack of the grasp of the moral responsibility to keep that oath. And it is literally that thing now where it's just these words you have to say because that's part of taking the job. And for a guy like you, a guy like me, and many others that are out there, and I will say there are many others out there, it is powerfully important. But there's this fear factor that comes in, whether it's a mandate for the jab or following something else. Like, I've invested in this. I lose everything if I lose this. And that is really hard for people. And that's why, bravery such as yours and Kyle's and these others who are speaking out is what we need to be encouraging. And like you said, investigating the people that are putting these people in the position where standing on their oath could cost them their livelihood, cost them literally everything. They shouldn't have to worry about being homeless and not being able to eat because they actually took their oath seriously. So next big appearance for you is Tuesday night with Hannity.
Yep. It's on the slot for me, but I'm thinking I'll probably have some more coming up after this most recent transcribed interview that I did. I think that they're going to want to hear what's really going on behind the scenes. So I'm hoping to speak to as many people about it.
Going to be doing any book signings here?
When it comes out, yeah, it'd be great. But I'll listen to the publisher, the experts on that.
Are you allowed to fly? Are you?
Yeah, no fly listed. I flew to Washington last week and got a nice little cold, so I'm just getting over it, actually.
Well, in Minnesota, we just call that winter.
That's true.
So, any place that people could be looking for you or checking you out? I know we got you on the Twitter. On Twitter,
at real Steve Friend, and on Truth Social at real_Steve Friend. And yeah, just any support that people can give. If they see me out there, just share my appearances, because like you said, the audiences might not cross paths, and this information is definitely should be seen and viewed by as many as possible.
Yeah, well, I know a lot of people. I mentioned some of the people I listen to some of the people that watch me, and they're like, "Who's that?" And I'm like, "How do you not know who these people are? Where are you on this?" So, how's the family holding up through all of this, Steve?
They're good, man. It helps a lot that
got the kids working yet?
No, 8 and 5, so I can't quite have them strapping on the lawnmower yet. But it helps a lot that we live in Florida, and it's a great state for us, and they're in a good school. So they're just going about their day, and they just know that Dad's work truck isn't here right now. But now that I've started this new position, I think that everything will be on the up for the new spring. It'll be whole new me.
Is the new position, is that a work from home?
Yes, it is for now. I'm gonna have to travel back and forth to DC, obviously, is as needed to help advise this committee.
Don't take Amtrak.
No, I'm not going to be doing that. Daytona has a pretty good straight shot up to Reagan, so I'll have to do that. But it's good for when I am home. We had an office set up, and I'm able to do that. And I write. I wrote that book. I've been writing some different op-eds and columns, so it's something that I'm getting a knack for, and hoping to bring another talent to the fold.
So you're going to be Kyle's new co-host then all the time as well, because
I think I've made 8, 9, 10 appearances on there. I'm becoming like the Baba Booey to the Howard Stern show,
or the Robbie the Fire Bernstein to Dave Smith. One of the maybe with a little less cursing.
That's true.
It's got KD asks, his documentary coming?
Yeah, I'm sorry, you cut out.
No, yeah. KD asked if there's a documentary coming out.
Oh, no, I don't think so. I haven't been approached by any film crews. I don't know if I'm that interesting. I think I did sit for the Epic Times. They're doing a follow up to the January 6th documentary that they did originally, and I will be appearing in that. But as far as just having enough material just to do the Steve Friend saga, I don't know. If it was loosely based on me, and they got somebody like super muscled up and cool, then maybe they could do a good TV show or movie. But
I like how you said super muscled up and cool for the history nerd in there.
Yeah,
The history nerd accountant. I'm thinking Dwayne Johnson is not going to do a good
man, that'd be
accountant,
great.
though.
Well, at this point, I think Tom Cruise probably looks younger than me, so maybe he will.
Oh,
But
nothing like self-deprecating humor.
I'm just I'm anxious to get back to normal. My older guy, I'm taking him to the range tomorrow to go shoot for the first time, and life. That's the stuff I'm more into.
So you're starting him off with the 470.
No, we're going straight with the AR tomorrow.
All right. Well, Steve, I cannot. Katie, have you seen my equipment, Kay? A GoPro and a camera phone. That's all I got. I don't. I am not producing anything with that. And I work Monday through Friday and do shows during the week. How am I supposed to make a documentary? But anyway, I really appreciate your time, and I'm thankful that and I mean it. I'm thankful that you did the actual heroic thing, which is to stand up and say no. You're supposed to defend the Constitution. It gives hope that there are other people out there, and to hear you mention them and say that they are fighting and whatnot. So if there's anything that anybody in my audience can do, guys, do go overhead, and the link to his book on Amazon, it's pre-order, but the link to his book on Amazon is in the description of this video. And I mean it. If you can show me proof that you bought his book, I will give you credit towards something in my store. And it's that important to me. So
thank you.
And thank you so much for what you did, not just having, done the law enforcement thing and then in the FBI and that end and the hard work. I know you saw some ugly things before all of this got really ugly for you personally. Make sure you're taking care of yourself, do some self-care, and let us know if there's anything else you need. And then now go spend some time with your family.
I will, man. Appreciate you having me on.
Thank you very much. It was great having you, and fight for yourself, man.
Will.
Take care.
All right. God bless.
God bless. Ladies and gentlemen, this is why these things are so important. I know I've said it before, but we really do need to be having these conversations with people that we meet that are in the law enforcement career field, that are training to be peace officers that are currently peace officers. It's going to be hard sometimes. Sometimes the conversations are going to be ugly, but we do have to stand up. And some of you have been there when you've heard me stand up to law enforcement. Some of you have heard me stand up to people in positions of supposed authority. Sometimes we have to do that. Sometimes it's going to be really uncomfortable. Sometimes it's going to be really ugly. Like, I know I'm developing a little bit of a reputation, and I don't think it's a right reputation. But if people want to have that view of me, I'm okay with it. I'm not anti-cop. I'm not anti-law enforcement. I'm not. Well, I might be a little bit anti-federal law enforcement agencies, and I know that if you listen to Steve's interview with Clint Russell over on Liberty Lockdown, literally said that he believes the FBI is beyond repair. It really is. It's beyond repair, and I do believe that. I think the only way to fix the FBI is abolish it. But that being said, if we can start talking to people in these positions or training to be in these positions about the Constitution and ask them what their first duty is, and I'll put links to a couple of conversations that I've had here recently in Rochester in the description of this video as well. If we can start having these conversations with these young wanting to serve types, there's hope that we can save a career field that used to be honorable. but it's lost a lot of its honor. Angie, I may have heard you a few times. Maybe you might have been there present for it. I know I probably made the UPA's job harder by doing what I did, but you guys, yeah. Anyway, I wish people could understand that the people who take the oath seriously are oftentimes the ones that are attacked the most. And so much of Steve's story is lockstep with mine as far as the things that were said to him and how he was treated and how he was handled. Sarah says, can you go into detail in a future episode? Oh, it popped. Oh, there it goes. In a future broadcast about the legislation you mentioned. Actually, the next episode that I'm going to be doing on defining a good cop is going to be about what I have titled constitutionally optimized policing. We call them cops, right? We hear about cops, citizen, community-oriented policing. Well, for me, cop is constitutionally optimized policing. But I will be going into that in the next episode of defining a good cop. And I don't know for sure when I'm going to be putting that out, but I will be laying the groundwork for that and putting that out together. And then I will be working with a few contacts that I have at the Minnesota House and the Minnesota Senate to try and push that through Minnesota. And then I'm also going to be working with other people to reach out to their local city councils and their local county commissions and have them implement the same thing. If the state doesn't do it, then let's get the city and the county to do it. Because I do think it needs to be required. This training needs to be required for people in law enforcement career field, that every year they have to get training in the Constitution. They have to get training in people's constitutionally protected liberties, and not granted by the Constitution, but protected and enshrined and ensconced in the Constitution. The law enforcement, above everything else, needs that. First and foremost, they are the first line of defense between the loss of our liberties, or between us and those who will strip us of our liberties. They have to be, because if they're not the first line of defense, they're going to be the first line of offense in taking those from us. That's it. There's no neutral ground on this, my friends, at all. They're either the line of defense or they are the offense. They either protect them or they strip them. That's it. We have to understand that. That's why I have defined good cop in such a very narrow way. They protect them or they strip them. End of story. If they don't do either of those, then they're not a good cop. Remaining neutral is not okay. Saying, well, I don't know if I really think that's a constitutional issue. No, everything's constitutional, in the sense of everything comes down to the Constitution for us as American people in a free republic. If you will, my friends, every single one of you that has watched, I'm pleading with you, not because I'm just trying to drive up numbers, because they've already given me limited monetization on this video. I don't think we were more than, let's see, where are we at? Yeah, we were not more than 10 minutes in to the conversation with Steve, and they already put ad suitability at limited. There's a good chance that I might win the appeal. I've already put the appeal in while I was listening to Steve and talking to him. I may win the appeal on that. But there's also a good chance that they might give me a strike and take the video down, and it will be saved. And if they do that, it'll go up on Rumble. But I would appreciate it in the meantime if you will go to every one of your groups, to every place that you are on Twitter, to every one of your social media platforms, Telegram, Getter, True Social, whatever Facebook, whatever it might be. Find every group that cares about this issue. Put this out there for people who maybe don't even know who Steve is. who don't even understand that there are people in the FBI who are standing and doing the right thing, please, I'm begging you, put this out there so that we can raise awareness. That's all I'm asking, because it is that important. And once again, if you buy Christie's book, you see my interview with her, my conversation with her from a couple weeks ago now. If you see my conversation with her, you could buy her book and get a $5 credit towards anything that I have up here or any of this stuff. Or you can buy Steve's book that I shared, and the link to buy his book is there. If you would share that or buy that and show me that you have pre-ordered, or that once you get it, I will give you $5 credit towards anything in my store. It's that important to me. I'd much rather see Steve sell his book and make some money so that he can take care of his family. Or you head over to the Give, Send, Go, which is also in the description of this video, and give, so that those especially who don't have any income, who have given up their career because they've decided to do the right thing, support them. We have got to watch out for one another. And I'm going to go because it's a hard day, to be honest with you. I didn't think it was going to hit me this hard today, but the conversation with Steve has, I don't know. It was 2 years ago today that I knew that my career was over. I knew it was over. One way or another, I knew it was over. And for what? What did Kyle Seraphin do? What did Steve Friend do to deserve that? Really? They did the right thing. Kyle and Steve did the right thing, and they lost their careers, and others are losing their careers for doing the right thing. So all I can ask you guys to do is like, comment, share, and tell people to subscribe. Be well.
We are going for liftoff in T-minus 30.
Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment.
Secondary guidance systems engaged.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark.
All systems are a go. All systems are a go.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at